So I said the other day that I had what I thought was a solution to the Category 13 deck. And in general, I am actually pretty decently happy with this list. This deck is extremely aggressive. You are more than capable of, on turn 2, doing 6 points of damage with 5 cards in hand. At which point your opponent now has to remove 3 forwards from the field, or they're just going to lose the game. It's a little bit one-dimensional, which scares me. One thing I really rate highly is flexibility. I will take a lower power ceiling for a more versatile deck, and this deck does have very clear choke points because of that. But I think that sometimes you can just go fast enough where your opponent doesn't have an option. I think in a 2-deck format, if you want something that will just stomp wind, especially mono wind, this deck is more than capable of doing that. So where do we begin with this as a deck? Well, first off, let's go ahead and I'm going to pull up the starter deck cards. Because I think we need, unfortunately they're not on FF decks just yet, so I have to get them off of Discord for our starter deck images. So the relevant ones are going to be the fire and the ice cards. So we're going to do, that'll work just perfect. And I need this card. So the centerpiece of the deck is lightning, and as hesitant as I am to build around a 2CP light card, given that light is a very vulnerable element, it makes it very scary to build around, and it's also an element that doesn't pay for other cards, so when you're running 3 of a card, it's extremely bricky. And we're kind of running 9 copies of this lightning as far as ways to get her onto the field, but she's so central to the deck. She's kind of like Biggs mixed with Lee's mixed with Sophie. It is crazy how powerful this card is as long as you have enough 13 forwards. So to enable that, we're on cards like this Vanille. This Vanille is maybe, I think, the best card in the starter deck. I think this card can show up generically in all kinds of lists. I think there are enough good lightnings between, you could run the light lightning in a lot of lists. The water lightning would be good in a water fire deck. The new Fang, I think, is a generically solid card, given how good a lot of current Bahamets are and her ability to do damage with them. Hope is the odd one out. There's not really a great Hope you'd want to play with it, but she's just a solid card that enables a lot. And what this deck really is trying to do is cascade 13 forwards out the same way Mono Wind cascades out its backups. And Vanille represents 2 backups or 2 forwards by herself, which for the purposes of this deck is really good. And in a similar vein, that's what this Sarah and Mog 13-2 do. I didn't really think much of these when I first saw them, and partly because I think that the Opus 17 Legend Sarah is such a powerful card, but in a deck like this, it actually makes a lot of sense because Sarah is a 2-cost forward that gets back a forward, and even can refund the CP from what she does. So if you have to get a couple backups down early, you actually do have the ability to go Sarah Mog, play the Mog, get back 2 backups, and then pop down Lightning for free. Ends up actually working out extremely well. And this Mog actually ends up being very passable because it gets very large thanks to exactly Lightning. Usually if you're ever attacking, when I first read this, I just kind of naturally assumed it couldn't attack or block. But that's not the case. Mog 13-2 is more than capable of attacking, and it usually is going to attack as a 5 to 7k power forward on 1 CP, which by itself is quite solid actually. So let's do the card by card. So we have 3 copies of Lightning. We have Kuchaspel and Snow as our Sarah and Mog 13 stand-ins. Unfortunately, we need to run a 3/3 line of these. I really feel like with the EX burst from the you really want to be able to get the search off of the Sarah, and the EX burst is a really nice bonus. So we're on 3/3, and the nice thing is there are also just cheap forwards we can play. We're on the starter Vanille. Rain is in place of that. And we're on Opus 18 Fang. I thought about playing the starter deck one, but this Fang is just so crazy. So if you haven't read her, she's basically Beatrix, but for Category 13. But Category 13 is entirely working on trying to get out powerful forwards, so Fang just enables that to an absolutely crazy degree. There are a lot of 2-card combos that end up doing the entire line by themselves. Fang is a part of most of those. And then we've got the rest of our forward lineup. We're going to go with just a bunch of good stuff Category 13. Proto Falcie Adam is just kind of obnoxious to remove. That's kind of his only real goal, is a 13 forward that your opponent can't kill easily. This Snow lets us play the Lightning from the deck by discarding a card. Hard to complain about that. Obviously, this Orphan needs no introduction. If it hangs around, it's just a good card. It's generically powerful enough where I feel okay here, but this is definitely not like the most optimal list for it. But it's a passable enough Category 13 forward. You could also run a copy of Bartandelus on this list, which is even in the starter deck, actually. So if you wanted to continue to keep this as low cost as possible, it's one of the recommendations you could swap in. And Caius. Caius, when he enters the field, you can play a character that costs 3 or less from your hand out of the field. So you can go Caius into Vanille into Lightning. That gets you your 3 forwards for Lightning to get her triple trigger off on the next turn. We also are running one copy of Jin. It just pairs very well with the Vanille special. Makes it very hard to block the deck profitably. It's just an all-around good stuff card. For summons, I'm on actually 12. I'm on a pretty decent number of them. 2 copies of Solera. We're looking for kind of cheap removal. You can sometimes go Sarah into Mog, Sarah then Dole 2 forwards, and then Zolera, the problematic one, off. It's also just a really clean out to Yuffie. That's a lot of the times that should be a goal, is make sure you have a... Like right now, you should have at least one thing that kills Yuffie consistently. Zolera happens to do it very well for ice decks, so big fan of that. 3 copies of Brynhildr. It's even reprinted in the starter deck, so you don't have to go anywhere to get them. Solid enough EX burst, looking to really cheaply clear the way for us to actually get our points of damage in. 2 copies of Belias the Gigas. This is the most powerful Belias has ever felt. You'll notice the only forward that has haste is actually Lightning. But because we're looking for attack triggers, Belias allows us to kind of sneak in those points of damage and those extra attacks to really make that Lightning more powerful. I've even considered bumping this to 3 copies. There's a turn 2 OTK line where, like, if you go turn 1, you get 3 forwards on. Turn 2, play a forward, draw into Belias, cast the Belias. And the opportunity cost is so low, too. The haste in first strike makes it very hard to block. Gets out of the way of combat damage. If you're on a budget list, 100% you could bump to a 3rd copy of Belias as well. In fact, on a budget list, you would probably just... For this deck to be about a $30 deck... Actually, no. The starter deck is $25. So if you were to cut the Amaterasus, this is probably about a $35 deck. You can go to a 3rd copy of Belias the Gigas, throw in the Bartandelus and a 2nd Proto Falcie Adam, and you're basically doing the same thing, just without the board protection that Amaterasu provides. Lastly, we have 2 copies of this Bahamut. This allows us to help clear the way. I considered running a copy of Salamander instead, as like a cleave, but generally this one is just so good at answering specific cards. It's a 1-card Fat Chocobo Edge answer. You can just ignore an Orin by putting 1k on him and then 9k on the target you want to actually hit. It just catches so many situations, and this deck draws enough cards where it's actually not difficult to do. So that's it for the forwards. The backups are pretty simple. We're on the Mont Blanc Hurdy package to kind of quickly color fix. A lot of times you can play this deck off of 2 backups with no problem. They're also Moogles, which means they have further synergy with the Sarah. Same for class second. It's a 1-card backup fixer. It does admittedly feel really crazy sometimes to go turn 1 class second, turn 2. You go Sarah, search Mog, then play Mont Blanc. Sarah activates the Mont Blanc and the Hurdy, and then you can then play something off of those. Like, just a lot of situations where the Moogle synergy comes up. Hurdy is a very powerful backup, being able to like back attack in, say an Orphan or even like a Caius. Like your opponent goes to pass, you go Hurdy, Caius, Lightning, or Caius, Vanille, search Lightning, play Lightning on your next turn. We have 1 copy of Unalesca just to kind of help proc the Orphan, just a decent ice backup. And then I did the thing that I started doing now where instead of standard unit backups, I'm kind of just going for a lot of solid 1 of EX burst. So Saz, Aeolus, Tella, Selfie, and Tifa. Search a summon, recur an ice character, recur a summon, recur a fire forward, and then just big ping. And that's the list. As you can see, we've actually got a pretty high density of EX burst. We have 3, 6, 9, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 EXs. So even if our opponent is trying to recover, we do have a chance if we end up starting to take some damage. You could definitely like edit this list as you like, but I'll kind of show you what I mean by how this deck can actually get really quick play. So we're going to go into FF decks and go to the play this hand, this deck functionality. And this hand actually is quite good. I would keep this. We have the class second and the Hurdy. We can get 2 backups down turn 1 with no problem. But I'm going to try to show the actual combo. Say I know I'm against wind, right? So I'm going to hit the mulligan, try to hit the anti-wind combo, which I actually did. So I know my opponent's on wind. I got to kill them in 3 turns or force them to try to really have a good pop-off turn before that. So I draw my first card. That's totally acceptable. So I can go... Wow, I can actually do a lot with this hand. 1, 2... Like that. Okay, so yeah. With this hand, you can go... Caius for Fang. Fang, reduce the cost. Discard this Tella, play Snow. Snow, we can pitch the Vanille. Play out a Lightning. And we have 3 forwards on turn 1. But it gets crazier, so... Put this back on the top of the deck. Shuffle, so that I can swing the Lightning, get a point of damage in. So then it goes to my opponent's turn. And the weird thing about this board is that this board is a 7k, a 9k, and a 9k. It's actually quite large. But let's say, oh, you know, they play a backup or something, right? So I start my next turn. I draw 2. I even drew an Amaterasu, which is hilarious. So now I can go straight to combat. I can swing Mashari. My whole field gains 1,000 power. So she swings as a 10k. My opponent takes 1 damage, right? So I'm going to just put damage over here to showcase. So they're taking a point. So now I swing Snow. Lightning triggers again. My whole field gets pumped by 1,000. Snow is swinging as a 11k. And I get a draw. Well, they're not blocking an 11k on their second turn, so they take the damage, right? So they've taken 3 points of damage. So I can swing now Fang. They take a point of damage from Lightning. I get a draw. Fang now has gained 3,000 plus her own 2. She's swinging as a 10k. So that's hard to block. There we go. We're at 5 points of damage. And I I have 5 cards in hand, including an Amaterasu to protect myself with. If I wanted to here, I could go even further on my next turn playing out more forwards, but I probably just even hold this and wait and see what my opponent actually does because I have the Amaterasu in hand. You can actually get an OTK here. I'm going to put these. When you draw for turn, say I drew... yeah, I'm going to say that I had these. I could go here and here. If one of the 2 cards I drew was a Belias the Gigas, I can now haste the other 13 forward I play, and that's lightning plus draw. That's actually game on turn 2. But I really like the aggression this deck puts on. Admittedly, it doesn't have a great late game. Even a card like Caius, I think, is less of an issue in this list than I would expect. The downside of having to sacrifice a character. I thought about having some fun with that, playing some cards that want to go to the break zone, but in general, he's really just here to try to ramp our forwards in the same way that a lot of decks try to ramp backups. But you can see just how quickly this deck gets online and how powerful the damage that comes through is once it does. I think weaknesses, we're a little weak to XIII. XIII would be very, very bad. You can go to combat phase, your opponent with XIII, which would kill a bunch of your forwards. EX bursts that kill the lightning can be a problem because you can struggle to get the damage across. But sometimes you just go so fast that you kind of get in and out before your opponent really even realizes there was a game of Final Fantasy TCG being played. There's definitely some room to experiment. I think some of the lightning cards, especially the Hope, could kind of do a reasonable impression. There's very likely a world where you can play Fire Lightning, but I really feel like Fire Ice is just a better element combination in general. I think the Mont Blanc Hurdy synergy is unbelievably good, as it turns out. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments, and I will see y'all next time.